Okay, so are you ready to go deep on this one?
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this one.
Me too. Um, this is going to be fascinating, but also kind of infuriating.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's the story of Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis. Have you heard him?
I'm familiar with the name. I think I know the basics.
Well, we're going to really dive into those basics.
Who's good?
All right, so Semmelweis is this medical pioneer who fought like crazy for a really simple solution to a really big problem.
Right. And it's something that should be obvious to us now, but back then?
Huge deal. And this is going to sound familiar.
Okay.
It's about hand washing.
Yeah, I knew it.
But the thing is, back in the 1800s, when this is all happening, childbed fever was like the worst nightmare for new mothers.
Absolutely. And what's wild is that the solution, like hand washing, it's so simple, right?
So simple.
But it was like pulling teeth to get people to accept it.
It really makes you think about why progress is sometimes so slow.
Yeah, for sure.
So our source material for this deep dive is a YouTube video from the Biographics channel, which, they usually do like celebs and historical bigwigs.
Right, right.
But they did an episode on Semmelweis, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, maybe it means he's finally getting the recognition he deserves.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
All right, so let's set the stage.
Okay.
We're talking 1800s childbed fever is rampant. Mortality rates are crazy high, like up to 35% in some hospitals.
Wow.
Can you even imagine the fear around childbirth at that time?
I mean, it must have been terrifying.
Right. And the YouTube video even said that women in Vienna were more likely to survive childbirth in the street than in the hospital.
No way. Seriously?
Seriously, it's crazy.
That is wild.
So this is where Semmelweis comes in. He's a young doctor working at the Vienna General Hospital.
Okay.
And the thing that really stuck out to me in the video was how meticulous he was about keeping records.
Oh, really?
I mean, this guy tracked everything.
Which back then, that wasn't really a thing?
Not at all. Data analysis wasn't exactly standard procedure in medicine.
So he was ahead of his time in that way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And his attention to detail is what leads him to this huge discovery.
Okay. I'm hooked. Tell me more.
So the Vienna General Hospital had two maternity clinics.
Okay.
One staffed by doctors and medical students, the other by midwives.
Okay.
And the mortality rates between the two were drastically different.
Really? How different are we talking?
Like shockingly different. The doctor's clinic had a mortality rate as high as 18%, while the midwives clinic had a rate under 2%.
Whoa, that's a huge difference.
Right. So of course Semmelweis is like, what is going on here?
I mean, how could you not be?
Exactly. He becomes obsessed with figuring out why.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a life or death mystery.
Totally.
He starts ruling things out methodically, like overcrowding, climate. Those were similar in both clinics.
Okay.
He even tried different birthing positions, thinking maybe that was a factor.
Interesting. And what about psychological factors, like, the stress of being in a hospital?
He thought about that too. He even asked the priest to stop ringing a bell when passing through the ward after a death,
Oh.
trying to reduce the fear women felt.
Makes sense. It all adds to the stress.
Right. But for a long time, he's coming up empty.
Oh, man. So what was the breakthrough?
Well, it came from a really tragic event.
Okay. What happened?
His friend and colleague, Jacob Kolechka,
Yeah.
he died.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
And it was from symptoms that were very similar to childbed fever.
Oh, wow.
And the thing is, Kolechka cut himself during an autopsy.
Oh, that's right. I remember reading about that.
And that's when it hits Semmelweis.
Wait, I think I'm getting it.
What if something was being transmitted from the cadavers to the women in the maternity ward?
Oh, man. Like some kind of invisible thing.
Exactly. And remember, this is before germ theory.
Right, right.
So Semmelweis is working purely on observation and intuition.
So he's basically a medical detective.
Exactly. It was a remarkable leap of insight.
For sure.
So he theorizes that what he calls cadaverous material is being carried on the hands of doctors who performed autopsies.
Ah.
So then they examine patients without washing their hands.
Makes sense. And the midwives didn't do autopsies.
Exactly.
Wow, it's so simple.
Right. And that leads him to a really simple solution.
Let me guess. Hand washing.
Bingo. He mandates that all doctors and students wash their hands with a chlorinated lime solution before examining patients.
So that should be it, right? Problem solved.
Well, you'd think so,
Yeah.
but you are not going to believe what happens next.
Oh, man. This is where it gets frustrating. Isn't it?
Oh, yeah. So instead of being met with open arms, Semmelweis's findings are met with incredible resistance.
Really? But why? It seems so obvious.
I know, right? Like today, we take hand washing for granted.
Totally.
But back then,
Yeah.
the idea that doctors, these respected figures, were spreading disease, outrageous.
Yeah, they must have been insulted.
Totally. And you have to remember, the prevailing theory of disease at the time was miasma.
Miasma, right? Bad air.
Exactly. So to convince these guys that something invisible on their hands could be deadly,
I can see how that would be a tough sell.
it'd be like trying to convince someone today that the earth is flat.
Totally. It challenges your whole worldview.
Right.
Right.
And on top of that, remember, this is a time of huge social and political upheaval.
Oh, right.
So Semmelweis being Hungarian and advocating for this radical change,
Yeah.
it didn't sit well with a lot of his colleagues.
Especially those in power.
Exactly.
Ah.
So, sadly, prejudice played a role too.
It's a reminder that scientific progress can be hindered by so much more than just a lack of understanding.
Absolutely. So what happens is Semmelweis eventually leaves Vienna General Hospital
Okay.
and they abandon his hand-washing protocol.
Oh, no.
And you can guess what happens next.
Mortality rates went back up.
Through the roof, all those preventable deaths,
It's just heartbreaking.
it really is. And the rejection takes a huge toll on Semmelweis himself.
Yeah.
He becomes super frustrated, disillusioned.
Mm.
The video even said that he started writing these like scathing letters to other doctors,
Oh, wow.
accusing them of being murderers.
Wow, he must have been so passionate about it.
You could tell he was just heartbroken seeing all these mothers die when he knew it could be prevented.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the burden of that.
The weight of that knowledge,
Yeah.
the constant pushback,
Yeah.
it eventually leads to his mental breakdown.
Oh, that's awful.
It's so sad. And the irony is almost unbearable.
What do you mean?
The man who dedicated his life to fighting sepsis,
Right.
he ultimately dies from sepsis himself,
Oh, wow. From an infected wound.
most likely.
That is tragic.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of ignoring evidence and clinging to outdated beliefs.
For sure. But his work didn't die with him, right?
Thankfully, no. Eventually, thanks in part to Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, who proved the existence of germs,
Right.
the medical community starts to accept Semmelweis's findings.
It's amazing how much we take that for granted now.
I know. And think about the impact.
Huge.
Hand washing is now the foundation of infection control in healthcare settings worldwide.
It's incredible.
Countless lives saved because of him.
It's wild to think that it all started with this simple observation.
Right. The difference in mortality rates between two clinics.
And it led to this revolution in how we think about hygiene.
All thanks to one man who was willing to challenge the status quo.
And it makes you wonder, right?
What are we missing now?
Exactly. What seemingly obvious solutions are we overlooking today?
That's a really good question. What do
Yeah.
you think?
Honestly, I have no idea. But it's something I'm going to be thinking about a lot more now.
Me too. It really
Yeah.
makes you think about all the things we just accept as truth without really questioning them.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder if we're making the same mistakes as those doctors back in Semmelweis' time.
Oh, definitely. Look, we're so advanced in so many ways, but
Are we really?
that's the question, isn't
It is. So where do we go from here?
Well, I think the first step is awareness.
Right. Like knowing that these blind spots exist.
Exactly. Because if we don't even know they're there.
You can't fix them.
Exactly. So how do we become more aware?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is, but I think a big part of it is being willing to question everything. Even the things that seem obvious.
Especially the things that seem obvious.
Right, because those are often the things that we're the most blind to.
Exactly. Like with Semmelweis and hand washing.
It seems so basic.
But it turned out to be revolutionary.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
maybe the next big breakthrough
Yeah,
is hiding in plain sight,
it could be. And the only way we'll find it,
is if we keep our eyes open.
and our minds open.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So what do you say we take a break?
Yeah, let's let all this sink in
And then we'll come back and
and see if we can uncover some of those hidden truths.
sounds like a plan.
All right, so we're back, and I gotta say, my mind is still buzzing from all that.
Mine too. It's just incredible to think about, you know.
How much one person can change the world.
Totally. And it's also kind of scary to think how easily those changes could have been ignored.
Oh, yeah. It makes you wonder how many other Semmelweises are out there
Right. People with groundbreaking ideas that are just getting shut down.
because they challenge the status quo.
Exactly. Or because people are just too stuck in their ways to listen.
It's like we as humans have this built-in resistance to new ideas.
I think you're right. Like our brains are wired to prefer what's familiar.
Even if what's familiar is wrong.
Oof. Yeah. That's a tough one.
It is. And it makes me think about, all the problems we're facing today, like climate change, social injustice, all this stuff.
Yeah,
What if the solutions are out there,
right in front of us.
but we're just not seeing them?
Because we're too stuck in our old ways of thinking.
Exactly. It's kind of terrifying when you think about it.
It is, but it's also kind of exciting
How so?
because it means that there's still so much potential for change.
Right. Like we're not stuck
Nope. We just have to be willing to open our minds
to new possibilities,
to new ways of doing things.
to new ways of thinking.
Exactly. And that's where I think Semmelweis's legacy really comes in.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's not just about hand washing.
Okay.
It's about the courage to challenge the status quo,
Right. Even when it's hard.
even when everyone's telling you you're wrong,
It's about trusting the evidence.
even when it goes against everything you thought you knew,
And it's about never giving up on the truth.
no matter the cost.
Wow. That's powerful.
It is, and it's a message that I think we all need to hear.
Especially right now.
Absolutely.
So what do you say?
Let's go out there,
And change the world.
one hand wash at a time.
And one open mind at a time.
That's a great way to put it. So, to everyone listening out there,
Keep questioning. Keep learning.
and never underestimate the power of a simple solution.
Because you never know. It just might change the world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, Semmelweis's story is a call to action for all of us to be more curious, more questioning, and more willing to challenge the status quo. Stay curious, folks.